Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw. This photo is so simple, and it's really okay. So it's basically a photograph of what looks like a lime tree.
Mhm.
It's photographed at high noon, and there is a lime or a very green orange sitting on. I'm assuming that's your hand, and I don't know if that's your hand. Maybe it's not. And the bush is very small. It's not a full blown tree. It's actually a very tiny, but there's this really nice fruit.
Mhm.
And yeah, so what is this, and what's the significance?
Well, I took that picture in 2019, and that was back in my country of origin, which is Cameroon.
Okay.
And that was my father's hand. Basically, he was holding a,
Ah.
a citrus fruit. I think it was orange or something like that. And we traveled from town to a rural area because one detail I have to mention is that in most African countries, mostly sub-Saharan African countries, a lot more people come from rural areas. So they leave rural areas to town. So we went there, and we went to our agrarian plantation field. We went there, and he was just showing me various products that he's been
Okay.
working on in to grow in our plantation field for quite some years now that I have been outside Cameroon. I've been in Ghana, but he said at that time
Okay.
that this is where wealth comes from, the wealth of our family.
Okay.
So this photo mostly relates to my own story, my DNA, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a sense, that it talks about what is wealth, what does a generation can leave to another, in mostly in the
Mm.
African context here. So, yes, he talked to me about how much nature is important, not only to preserve, but also to exploit responsibly in order to bring the best out of humanity. So that was always,
Okay.
some kind of catchy sentence for him.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing about the photo. Your father looks like he must be really big because the sapling or the tree or the bush, it looks very young. It doesn't look very tall at
Yeah.
all. And his hand looks very sizable. So how tall is he?
Well, it was. I think it was 6'5". It was around 6'5".
You're saying he was.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, what oh,
He's no more, but he was. But
I am very sorry.
thank you very much. But he left us
My
with.
sincere apologies.
Thank you. He left us with very good memories of of his past. So here, yes, you talk about this
Yeah,
young
yeah.
tree, and usually orange trees don't grow very fast in my rural area, rural region. So we have sometimes to find some fertilizer, but here you can see that it's still young. It's still a young
Yeah,
quality tree that you see, but then still it shows a sign of productivity, if that makes sense. So
for sure.
um
For sure.
yeah.
Wow. So you grew up in Cameroon and you refer to a plantation.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that these are orchards, or these are like, so a huge, like, how large of a space or how much land was your family relying on?
Well, I would say pretty big. Honestly, I'm not an expert in measurement of lands, but
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I do believe that we had the very large portion of lands, and I think we would be able to build normal size houses, about let's say 20 of them, to fit them in that same
Mm-hmm.
that same
Oh wow.
agrarian
Okay.
field. Yes.
Okay. So you're like, well, this whole idea of you're shaped by your environment,
Yeah.
and then your professional life leads you to the United Kingdom, like to England,
Yeah.
which is heavily shaped,
Mhm.
is heavily kind of like the footprint of humanity is rather extensive, right?
Yeah.
So would you say that where you grew up was there are a lot of wild spaces, or would you say that it was, how much has your perception or appreciation of human impact on the environment changed?
Well, I think what struck me honestly when I arrived in the UK, and I very much appreciated the fact that communities were really, really considered the environment, as sacred to preserve. You would see the difference into, I would say one aspect of it, and when I talk about one aspect of it, let's say waste management, you will barely see it at different corners of streets. Trash is disposed anywhere and anyhow. In
Mm-hmm.
comparison to most spaces, in Africa, and also the techniques to dispose of waste are kind of almost different. So what is more
Yeah,
common here is to manage waste. You have waste management services that come, and then they put trash in the trucks, and then they bring it to the factory and take care of the disposal. But then in Africa, most of the time you would see people who can't afford to have a trash can home, and sometimes where the management, the waste management service cannot reach. So what do they do at that time? So they take their waste and then they burn it. They burn it
yeah,
somewhere behind at the backyard.
sure.
So that's what they do. And I think the fact that I saw how much service can be provided here, when it comes to waste management and well-being of the environment. I think it's not a matter of means, necessarily financial means, but I think it's a matter of common sense and also good governance and education. So that is still some form of a gap, in our history.
Right. But to be fair, I think the more you travel around, the idea of burning waste, it's, I've seen it in the Middle East, I've seen
Mhm.
it across Asia, I've seen it. I mean, it's a bit of a luxury. Is it a luxury? I don't know. But it seems to be like, you think you have to be very mature kind of economy, maybe, to be able to think also about waste processing. So
Yeah.
let's tie it back to the photograph, though. On some level, how does the this image capture either your motivation, or capture your the fuel that you use to do the work that you're doing?
Well, it actually fuels me a lot, and not only from my core, as I said earlier, like from a father to a son perspective, about the environment. So what does a father know about an environment that he can teach his son?
Is I don't know if the microphone, the socket or the jack isn't properly in or something, but when you're talking, there's a lot of static. Can you make sure the microphone is plugged in properly? And
Okay, is it better now?
yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah,
All right, I just removed my headset.
we are speaking across a vast territory, so
Yeah,
sometimes it works, sometimes it
it
doesn't.
doesn't. So right,
Okay, so back to the photograph.
yes, back to the photograph. I think it's more of a father-son relationship. So what does a father transmit to his son, basically as a knowledge? So what in his generation, because we talked a lot about what he how environment was managed in the past. It was a real long story, but also how technology today has given us the means to not just exploit the environment, but kind of preserve it better. But the problem is actually mostly the mindset. So basically the willingness, to understand the importance of preserving our nature, and also the while of course exploiting it, but also the importance of considering an expansion of ideas, innovative ideas that can be useful for future generations who are going to exploit the environment. So that kind of relationship I had with my father when we were, especially when we discussed about that on that field, he definitely clicked into my DNA, and I said to myself, okay, I have to find a way to link that to my policy decision or whatever research that I conduct and advice that I provide to different clients who are going to interact with that same environment, and how it is going to be a more sustainable approach for them. So this is how it kind of relates to my work.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. Fascinating. Lionel, great. Do you want to move to the next photo?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So, if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.